Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here today. Just moments ago, the governor signed House Bill 619, the Juneteenth National Freedom Day, into law. And there's his signature so we can show you for sure. I've been pushing for this legislation for a number of years, and I'm ecstatic to see my efforts, along with those of my colleagues, finally come to fruition. This bill officially designates today, June 19, as an annual observance of Juneteenth National Freedom Day in Pennsylvania. Many of you asked what motivated me to introduce this bill. There's a lady here on the front of this, that's Carolyn Lawson Mills, who came to me 9 years ago, walked in my office and told me about Juneteenth and asked me to do this legislation. At the time, she was in perfect health, but when she walked in, she said, "Before I die, I want this legislation." Well, unfortunately, Carolyn got cancer last year and passed away. But I was one of 3 people that spoke at her funeral, and in her funeral program says she worked diligently with Pennsylvania State Representative Sue Helm to secure a state holiday status for Juneteenth. Although the legislation passed the House of Representatives, unfortunately, it was not passed by the Senate. Plans are underway to honor Carolyn's legacy by continuing efforts leading to the establishment of Juneteenth as a state holiday in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And today we honor her legacy. Yeah. For those who may not be familiar with what Juneteenth is, please allow me to provide some information. Hopefully then we will all understand how important this legislation is. Juneteenth commemorates the June 19, 1865 announcement of the abolition of slavery in the state of Texas, which marked the completion of emancipation throughout the former Confederate States of America. The Emancipation Proclamation was issued by President Abraham Lincoln on September 22, 1862, declaring that all enslaved persons in the Confederate States of America were to be freed. But Texas, more geographically isolated from the Civil War, was not a battleground, and thus the people held there as slaves were not affected by the Emancipation Proclamation unless they escaped. Stakeholders migrated to Texas in order to escape the reach of the Union Army, and as a result, the population of enslaved people in Texas was estimated to be about 250,000 in 1865. News of General Robert E. Lee's surrender reached Texas in late April, and the Army of the Trans-Mississippi officially surrendered on June 2. This was the final major Confederate army to surrender. On June 18, the Union Army arrived in Galveston and occupied the state on behalf of the federal government. The next day, Union Army General Gordon Granger read aloud General Order Number 3, announcing that total emancipation of all enslaved persons. When we talk about the abolition of slavery, Juneteenth is seldom mentioned. Many consider the Emancipation Proclamation to be the end-all, be-all of abolition. But to omit Juneteenth from this story is to ignore the full truth of the abolition of slavery and the Civil War. It is my hope that this legislation and this holiday will raise awareness and knowledge of the events on June 19, 1865. I thank my colleagues in the House and Senate for their unanimous support of the bill and for the governor's quick response to my request to get it signed. In honor, I want to introduce the people who are going to speak today. The first one will be Representative Stephen Kinsey, who really has helped me tremendously with the bill. And also we'll go to the Richard Caskey, Assistant to the Superintendent, Susquehanna Township School District. Then Cleo Jarvis, President of the African American Network of the Poconos. Ronald Brown, National Juneteenth Northeastern Region Director and Pennsylvania Juneteenth Coalition Founder and Chairperson. And Lenwood Sloan, Executive Director of the Commonwealth Monument Project, to speak on the importance of this legislation. And just so you know, we do have Carolyn Mills' son here, Lawrence Mills, and granddaughter, Alita Lawson. And her brother, Stan Lawson, is standing over here to my left. So we're going to start out right now with Representative Stephen Kinsey.
Good afternoon. Is today a great day?
Yeah.
I can't hear you. Is today a great day?
Yeah.
Let me tell you, it's really an honor just to be here with you this afternoon. But let me begin by recognizing and thanking Representative Sue Helm. This was a journey. Yeah, let's give her a hand. Let's give her a hand. This is a journey that she undertook 9 years ago, 2 years before I came into this legislature. This representative was pushing hard for Juneteenth legislation, and we had some difficulties along the way over those past 9 years, but it's great to be here today, and I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for not only what you've done for me, but what you've done for these folks that are here and our ancestors before us. Thank you very much, Representative Helm. I also want to thank Governor Tom Wolf for signing House Bill 619 into law, commemorating June 19th as Juneteenth National Freedom Day. And I want to take a moment just to reflect on the historical perspective of this very impactful piece of legislation. From its origins of my ancestors who were forcibly taken into bondage from their homeland, to the freeing of the last enslaved Africans in America in Galveston, Texas, June 19, 1865. To those who lit the flame, our past African-American leaders who served right here in this very chambers, Crystal Bird Fawcett, the very first African-American woman to ever be elected into a state legislature, right here in 1938. To folks like Kay Leroy Irvis, Roxanne Jones, David P. Richardson Jr., just to name a few. To grassroots individuals and organizations who continue to carry the torch, the Ron Browns, the Giselle Jones, the Connie Swinsons of the historic Johnson House, the Philadelphia Juneteenth family, the Pennsylvania Juneteenth Initiative, the NAACP, the Western PA Juneteenth family, and many more individuals and organizations who reminded us daily of the charge to get this done. I want to say thank you to each and every one of you. And let me close by thanking the late Carolyn Ann Mills. Yes, 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 yes. You see, I never got the opportunity to meet Ms. Mills, but Representative Sue Helms shared with me as I wondered why this representative from Harrisburg, PA, a Republican, was sponsoring this impactful legislation. And I'm saying this from a historical perspective. You know, but once you get to recognize Sue Helm, it's not about party affiliation, it's about people that she serves. It's about people that she's committed to. And Ms. Mills, being one of her constituents, was one of the ones that she was committed to. And thus the journey began. So to Ms. Mills, the Mills family, and all of the other trailblazers, I want to say, family, it's done. And from this day forward, the people of Pennsylvania can stand proud in recognizing Juneteenth National Freedom Day as a special day of observance every year throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Thank you, Representative Helm. Thank you again to the Mills family. Thank you to all of the individuals and organizations that have been pushing behind the scene to make this happen. Thank you for being here today, this historical day. As we made history, the governor mentioned the second state to sign into legislation, the second state to make Juneteenth a national holiday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Kinsey. And now we have Dr. Richard Caskey, Assistant to the Superintendent, Susquehanna Township School District.
Thank you very much. It is both a privilege and an honor to address you today as a representative of the Susquehanna Township School District. As a former social studies teacher, I know the importance of studying history and keeping it fresh in our minds. As the old aphorism proclaims, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. History Peter Stearns states that history helps people understand societies, contributes to our moral understanding, provides us with an identity, and lays the foundation for genuine citizenship. The examination of history affords us the opportunity to assess various kinds of evidence, the sort of evidence we should use in shaping a more accurate picture of the past. History allows us to gain skill in sorting through conflicting perspectives and interpretations. Learning how to identify and evaluate these interpretations is an essential citizenship skill, which history provides the training. And last but not least, history allows us to assess past examples of change that in turn lead to the vital understanding of change in today's society. During the first half of the 20th century, economic and cultural forces contributed to a decline in Juneteenth celebrations. It wasn't until the emergence of the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s that began to see a resurgence in Juneteenth activities. While the civil rights movement pulled many African American youth away and into the struggle for racial equality, many linked their current struggles to the historical struggles of their ancestors. This was evidenced by student demonstrators in the Atlanta Civil Rights Campaign in the early 1960s, who wore Juneteenth freedom buttons as they marched through the streets in support of equal rights. In 1968, just months after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., one of the most famous Juneteenth celebrations was held in our nation's capital. Reverend Ralph Abernathy and widow Coretta Scott King called for people of all races, creeds, and economic levels and professions to come to Washington to show their support for the poor. Today, the Juneteenth holiday exists as a national event rather than a local one, partly because of the decision by Reverend Abernathy and Mrs. King to cut short the posthumous Poor People's March of June 19th and commemorate it with a Juneteenth celebration. Thousands of demonstrators returned home and initiated Juneteenth celebrations in local areas that where previously no such activity existed. So when you see a child, when you see a student, when you see your son or daughter, and they ask you why it is important to celebrate Juneteenth, please answer them by saying the holiday provides all Americans a sense of togetherness. Slavery of any kind is intolerable. Unfortunately, throughout the history of the world, slavery has been an institution in almost every geographic region. People of all races, colors, and creeds have fought tirelessly to end it, and their efforts should not go unnoticed. The end of slavery in 1865 was the beginning of our togetherness, and although it continues to grow slowly throughout history, I have no doubt that this generation of children and future generations will do a better job with watering the plant of freedom. By celebrating Juneteenth, you are celebrating a holiday just as important as the 4th of July and Memorial Day. For without the end of slavery, the United States of America would not have been possible. Speaking of this generation and its current and future contributions, I would like to recognize Miss Adeola Adeni, a member of the Susquehanna Township High School class of 2018 and a rising sophomore at Howard University. She has always had a passion for understanding and recognizing the history, accomplishments, and progression of African Americans throughout the world's history. Celebrating Juneteenth for Adeola is important as she believes that there is a special day for African American communities. The significance of Juneteenth cannot be understood, and in order to share this celebration with the greater Harrisburg community, Adeola is leading and planning an organization of the Greater Zion Missionary Baptist Church Juneteenth celebration. The event will celebrate the emancipation of enslaved African Americans through music, food, and the works of local Black-owned businesses. The celebration will take place this Saturday, June 22nd, and include a young adult music workshop, a musical celebration at 7 p.m. featuring our high school gospel choir, and more related activities. I'd like to thank Adeola for her insight and strong presence in the Susquehanna Township School District and the greater community. Adeola is an inspiring example of youth leadership that has changed the world for the better, and I commend her efforts to share and celebrate this holiday with our community. I'd like to thank you for giving the opportunity for me to speak today, and it is essential that this holiday be recognized and taught about in American schools. Thank you.
I want to thank Dr. Caskey for that, and our next speaker is Cleo Jarvis, President of the African American Network of the Poconos.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Thank you. Greetings. Woo! So the ancestors wanted me to sing that song. So greetings, everybody. I am Cleo Maria Boot Jarvis, and I'm also called Kwanzaa Mama. And it is such a pleasure and a joy. I'm full. I'm overwhelmed. I'm just, oh, you have no idea. But I'm in the presence of such illustrious people from all walks of life. I am so grateful to be here today. And I stand before you without shame or the stigma of slavery. For I represent those giants in whose footsteps I now walk and upon whose shoulders I stand. I stand tall because of ancient mothers and fathers. Those giants whose lives are testimony to the tenacity of the human spirit and the resilience of love. Giants like Ya Asantewa, Hatshepsut, Queen Nzinga, Scheherazade, Harriet Tubman, Fannie Lou Hamer, Rosa Parks, Mary McLeod Bethune, Dorothy I. Hyatt, and so many more unnamed, including my own grandmothers, who modeled for me how to stand. And I say it again, how to stand. And to leave wherever I land better than I met it. That is why I steadfastly spearhead several community events, including the Juneteenth Freedom Festival. This year, in the Poconos, the 13th annual Juneteenth Freedom Festival was held at Courthouse Square in Stroudsburg. That was this past Saturday. It was absolutely magnificent. Rep Brown was doing the, and we danced and we sang and we ate. We had a wonderful time. The spirit was high. People were mad at each other. When people were mad at each other, they came together and they made peace at Juneteenth. It was awesome. And I want to thank some of the members of the NAACP in Monroe County as well as the NCNW in Monroe County, who attended and supported. Now, let's talk about freedom. Let's face it, everyone wants to be free to choose how to live their lives. Everyone wants the best for their families and their loved ones. But because enslaved Africans were not afforded such freedoms, Juneteenth and the activities surrounding this event provide a form of healing, as well as an opportunity for forgiveness, and to share love with one another. Unfortunately, because Juneteenth is largely viewed as an African-American thing, it is not embraced by the general population yet, and I say yet, mainly due to lack of knowledge about its important role in the history of the United States. It should be duly noted that Juneteenth is a part of the history of the United States. I say it again. Juneteenth, everybody say it with me, Juneteenth is a part of the history of the United States. So my plea is to please consider the development of a curriculum that would allow young people opportunities to explore and empathize with one another. Not the chalk and talk stuff, okay? Real interactive opportunities, okay? And there are folks out there who are experts at that already. I truly believe that, and have witnessed how, the commemoration of Juneteenth provides opportunities to share and learn, as well as for citizens to truly embrace the ideals of freedom and equality for all. On behalf of the African American Network of the Poconos, I commend you all. The unanimous action of the Pennsylvania's elected officials, I commend you all that you embrace Juneteenth, and your actions have moved this commemoration to another level. You have shown the world that you collectively acknowledge freedom as a right for all. Thank you, Rep. Brown, for inviting me. Thank you to all the legislators. Thank you so much. I'm giving them a hug. I don't care. I'm a hugger. I'm a hugger, and I have to be me, folks. I'm sorry. I want to thank. That's my state representative, Rosemary Brown. I love her to life. And I'm just happy to be here to witness this occasion, and I hope to see you all of you, I'm inviting you now, Juneteenth 2020, Juneteenth Freedom Festival in Strasburg. It's always on the Saturday with the teen. So you won't forget the date, right? Because it's always on the Saturday with the, what? Teen. Thank you, bless you, love you all, peace.
Thank you, Ms. Jarvis. And our next speaker is Ronald Brown, National Juneteenth Northeastern Regional Director and Pennsylvania Juneteenth Coalition founder and chairperson.
Happy Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth. Happy Father's Day. Thank you. You know, on June 19th, 1910, was the first Father's Day. People don't know that. On Juneteenth Day. And a lady by the name of Snore Dobbs decided to recognize her father, who had served in the Civil War. And he wanted to recognize her, but she thought it was important to recognize him by honoring him on that particular day. So when we celebrate Juneteenth, we're also celebrating Father's Day. It also gives me an opportunity to celebrate, when I say honor that father, honor that Almighty Father on this particular day that made it possible for this day to be possible. Our fathers and our ancestors, we want to be able to thank them. Now, I have been hearing a lot of people talk about, and it's true, that on Juneteenth Day, which took place in Galveston, Texas, I think it's important that we begin to understand what give you the real information of that particular day. And I have sometimes I like to not, I like to go from the spirit. On April the 12th, 1861, the first shot that took place in the Civil War, where the Confederates had attacked the Union at Fort Sumter. And that was the first shot that took place in the Civil War. And 9 states happened to secede from the Union. During that whole process, they thought it was important, the Union League and the Pennsylvania, the first abolitionist society in Pennsylvania, they thought it was important to free African Americans as well as unite these United States of America. And at that time, the Union had less men than the Confederate had less men than the Union, but they had most of the generals. And so when the war took place, the Union League decided to, with the Lincoln issuing his emancipation on January 1st, 1863, which freed those Africans in the southern states and not those Africans in the northern states. But it gave those Africans an opportunity to participate and fight in the Civil War. The Union League decided to use the help of someone you probably know. People heard of Harriet Tubman? People heard of Frederick Douglass? And Octavius Cato? They used the help of those 3 to recruit Africans in the Civil War. Now, we have to be clear of what happened and how close we are to the history. Now, the Confederates began to march across Pennsylvania into Pennsylvania in the mid-June of 1863. Now, when they marched into Pennsylvania, they then marched how close? They came into opposite of Harrisburg, right here. That was right up the street. In Gettysburg. It was in Gettysburg, this close. And so when they did that, they asked those Africans who said, you know what? They're getting kind of close because now I think it's important that we all be able to participate in the Civil War so that we would not have to be sold back into slavery or have to go back through that process. And on June 19th, 1863, because of the Emancipation Proclamation, which enabled Africans to be able to man force and pick up guns and fight for the Union Army. They called out to those Africans to come down to participate. The first ceremony that took place was a parade that went from down South Street all the way around to 6th Street where the Liberty Bell was at. And another parade came from 4th and Brown all the way down, and they prayed and they drummed and they danced all the way to the Liberty Bell, where there was an enlistment ceremony that took place to enlist those Africans in the Civil War. Now, we was fortunate that we had one of the freedom soldiers, who's Lucretia Mott, who had her son, utilize her son's land, 3 acres of her son's land, to allow a place called Camp William Penn to come into existence. And so when those Africans enlisted down at the Liberty Bell, right at the bottom of the Liberty Bell, there's a saying called Leviticus 25:10. That means Leviticus chapter 25, verse 10. And the purpose of that was, the Liberty Bell was a gift given to William Penn because of the Quakers' issue on the issue of slavery. It was a gift that he gave it to him. Now, the importance of that verse in the Bible talks about reuniting your family, returning them to their tribe, stopping the oppression of one to the other. And so when they read those sayings right there to those Africans, they understood clearly what their mission was. They understood very clearly. And so at that particular point, after this ceremony took place, they marched from that point all the way to Camp William Penn. Now, if anybody in Philadelphia knows, it's a place called Cheltenham Mall. Anybody know Cheltenham Mall? Yeah. That was where Camp William Penn. And it went all the way to a street called Sycamore Street, right off of Broad Street. And there was 11 regiments that enrolled in that camp, that was part of that camp. There was 10,950. Some say 2,500 of Africans enrolled in it. They even had a supervisory committee, whereas they trained the commanders in the Civil War to train those applicants. And so those applicants was the specialists. They was the largest camp of applicants in the Civil War. It was a federal camp and the largest camp. Now I'm going to tell you about those applicants. It was those applicants that marched from that site because we was very fortunate. They was able to stop those Confederates from passing beyond Gettysburg. And so they went back. Now, if you know where the capital was where? Anybody know what the Confederate capital was? The federal capital was in Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. And so those applicants, they trained them to go from Pennsylvania to where? Virginia, where the capital was, right? Now, they had 6 regiments. Of the 11 regiments, there was the 6th, the 8th, the 22nd, the 41st, the 43rd, the 45th, and the 127th Infantry from that camp. And they was able to go to Virginia and defeat the Confederacy at the siege of Petersburg. They defeated them. And after they defeated them from that point, they said, the Confederates said, oh, man, they just wanted, they beat us. You know, what do we do? What do we do? So what did they do? They retreated. Now, you think they would retreat to where? The capital, right? Because they got to be able to do what? Protect their capital. Isn't that important? Yes. To be able to protect the what? The capital, which is in Richmond. Did they do that? No. You know what they did? They kept going. They said, no, you know what? We're going to go where Robert E. Lee is at. Who was Robert E. Lee? He was the general of the what? The Confederacy. So they abandoned their own capital to go to Appomattox, Virginia, where Robert E. Lee was. And so just before those 6 infantries, just before they went into battle to go battle with against General Lee, those infantry was turned into a special regiment called the 25th Corps. So they took those 6 infantry from Camp William Penn, and they made them a special unit just prior to doing what? Battle with who? Robert E. Lee. So just when they went to Appomattox, Virginia to engage in battle, just when he went to Appomattox, Virginia to engage in battle, what happened? Robert E. Lee, just when they started engaging, Robert E. Lee did what? I surrendered. They surrendered to those 6, the 25th Corps, those 6 infantry that was from Camp William Penn. And so the 22nd Infantry, right after Lee surrendered, 5 days later, they assassinated the President of the United States. And the 22nd Infantry they was one of the first. There was a regiment that was leading the procession and the funeral. They then went from that point where they went and captured Booth in the eastern shores of Maryland. And then went from that point and they joined the other 5 infantries, and then they was mustered to Texas. And then they went from June 13th, they began to go from this one area all the way to the last point on June 13th until they came upon Galveston, Texas. And this was a site where the last of the Africans needed to be given their freedom and needed to be given free. And General by the name of General Granger read General Order Number 3, which, if everybody knows, I heard someone say, after you read General Order Number 3, it says, "You are forevermore free," which led to what? A spontaneous celebration in the streets of Galveston, Texas. And what is that called? And we here as we celebrate this. I just want to, because of time, I just want to give some acknowledgement to Sue.
Thank you.
I tell you, man, I remember when I became aware, and I realized that I was part of the problem. And Teresa, where's Teresa at? I don't see her.
Back to the office.
But I was able to call Teresa, and I said, you know, I texted Sue, and I said, or emailed, I said, you know, let Teresa be the point person, because I know you're so busy, and I don't want to call you. Let Teresa. And through that relationship, we was able to, just by a phone call and an email,
We got it done.
we was able to get it done. Juneteenth.
We have one more.
And I want to thank all the, you want to say something, Sue?
We have one more speaker, just so
We had one more speaker. So I want to thank everybody, all the organizations that, you know, it's a coalition of organizations that do doing Juneteenth throughout the state of Pennsylvania. We want to thank you, because without you, we would not have been possible. I want to acknowledge my mother, who's in the crowd. I want to acknowledge my sisters, and I don't see the rest of the family. My brother over here, Timothy. Linwood Sloan, I got to acknowledge too, because Linwood played a major part in us being able to get funding, Juneteenth getting funding throughout the years. But this guy, I tell you, he's, well, you know. But let me stop, and I want to thank you all for this historical day. Happy Juneteenth.
Thank you, Ron Brown. And now we have Linwood Sloan, Executive Director for the Commonwealth Monument Project, to speak more on the importance of this legislation. I've known Linwood for the 13 years I'm here, and you can't ask for a better person. So, Linwood, it's yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I am happy to be the last speaker here. You're happy that I'm the last speaker here. But I've been asked to speak about what is the significance of Juneteenth to Pennsylvania. Why should Pennsylvania remember the events in Galveston? The purpose of Juneteenth for Pennsylvania is remembrance. The purpose for Pennsylvania is the remembrance of the diligence that it took, of the vigilance that it took. For us, Juneteenth is Jacob Compton, the carriage driver for Simon Cameron, who sped Abraham Lincoln out of Harrisburg in 1861 during the assassination attempt before he was inaugurated. Because if it wasn't for Jacob Compton, there may not have been a party of Lincoln. Juneteenth for us is Nicholas Biddle from Pottstown, Pennsylvania, an African-American who chose to go with his employer to Washington, D.C., to protect Washington, D.C., to help with the ammunition, who walked across Baltimore and was attacked by bricks and bottles by Irish gangs. A man who continued to march on despite the fact that he had been enslaved, and inspired that regiment so much that they closed ranks and continued on to Washington. Juneteenth for Pennsylvania is Basil Biggs of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, who some write down in history just as a grave digger, but who helped to bury 1,100 men who fell at Gettysburg with just a pick and a shovel. Juneteenth for us is John Aquila Wilson of York, Pennsylvania, who, when the Wrightsville Bridge was burned between Columbia and Wrightsville, at 15 years of age, chose not to run, but to join the United States Colored Troops. Juneteenth for us is Alexander Kelly of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who achieved his Medal of Honor as an African-American soldier in 1865, but it took to 1906 to give him his proper due. Juneteenth for us is David Bustle Bowser of Philadelphia, who helped to make the flags for the United States colored troops, who led us into battle and into honor and into glory. Juneteenth for us is Octavio Cato, the recruiter of the African American United States colored troops, the first president of the Negro Convention, who died in Philadelphia trying to register men and women to vote. Juneteenth for us is no sepia tone motto. It is no photographic memory. It's not a photo moment. Juneteenth for us is a blueprint for remembrance of the importance of the diligence and the vigilance that it will take in the next great battle